Hi class, we're going to be taking a look at the different elements of a story in regard to the Swiss Family Robinson we're reading right now. First off, we've got a couple elements that are present in every story we read. We've got setting, characters, plot, and conflict. Your setting is basically the time and place the story happens. The characters are the people involved. Your plot is your events, and your conflict is your struggle that is happening during the story. And this is actually what influences our plot. Now, in the story, the first piece we have is setting. The setting describes where and when the story takes place. This is what builds the background information of the story and creates images and pictures of our mind. The setting helps create a tone or a mood. If we're looking at the Swiss Family Robinson, we're seeing a lot of outdoor nature pictures, animal pictures that are created, pictures of the ocean and sailing, things that are happening in essence, what is generalized as Papua New Guinea area. Details in the setting can tell you time of day, year, history, scenery, weather, location. Sometimes it's subtle information, such as it never comes out directly and tells us it's the early 1800s for the setting, as in the time of Swiss Family Robinson. It hints at it through characters' actions, the things they describe, the clothing that they wear, the events that are taking place. Now, oftentimes, the setting is developed using our five senses. As you know, that's sight, smell, taste, feel, and sound. And so a good setting, the job is to help the reader picture what is actually happening in the book. If the writer has done an excellent job of setting, you can visualize and picture where this is taking place in the book. A good author is using those senses to create that vivid picture in your mind. For example, we've got this photo here. Some of you may have seen or would simply write, the castle was beside the water. That's a true statement. The castle is beside the water. But in creating setting for a story, that's not really creating a very good picture in your mind. Instead, you'd have the waves crash loudly against the shoreline. The fog lifted lightly and the medieval castle came into view. It was a beautiful sight. The fog brushed my face and I could smell the smoke from the fire in the distance and the taste of the sea salt on my lips. Do you see the difference that is? How much stronger of a picture that creates in your mind? So now it's going to be your turn. I'm going to have you pause the presentation in just a moment. And on the next slide, there's a picture of the setting. You might actually recognize this photo. In your own words, I want you to write a detailed description of this setting. Include as many adjectives, and don't forget to include those descriptions that are going to enhance each of those 5 sentences. Think about what you see, what you would hear if you were standing there, what you would feel, what you would smell, what you could taste. Here is our picture. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to write anywhere between 5 and 10 sentences describing to me what it is that this picture, this setting, using those 5 senses of yours. Okay. Every story also needs characters. You've got people, animals, creatures even. In every story we have what's called our protagonist, and that's the good guy. And here's a couple popular protagonists from recent movies. And then the opposite of that is our antagonist. This is the bad guy. Sometimes it's a generalized force depending on your type of conflict. Now with these characters we have something that's called characterization. And characterization, this is what shows a character's personality, shows what they're like, and it's what writers use, and it brings your characters to life, creates people in your story that are memorable, that you don't forget. So, for example, what I want you to think about right now, I want you to choose one character from the Swiss Family Robinson. And I want you to look back in your book, and I want you to answer these each with one sentence. And pause the video so you can do this. But I want you to look back, and I want you to think about this one character. And I want you to look in your book, and I want you to tell me, how would you describe his or her appearance based on what it tells you in the book? What kind of personality does he or she have? What kind of things does he or she like? And then I want you to come up with a list of approximately 6 character traits for this character based on the information you have in the book. Now, as I said, characterizations are the characters, the people, animals, individuals in your story. A writer can tell you directly about these characters. Freddie was very competitive. Or a writer can tell you indirectly. 2 days before the game, Freddie gathered his teammates and laid out a plan. Then he looked at them and said, "We're going to win this one, no excuses." Again, the author tells you that Freddie was competitive, but he doesn't actually come out and use those words. You'd use inferencing to determine that information. So now, direct characterization. This tells you, just as the word said, directly the personality of the character. Direct characterization is obvious. It literally spells it out. It says the character is, or uses it as an adjective in the example. The patient boy and the quiet girl were both well behaved and did not disobey their mother. It's coming out directly and telling you their character traits. Indirect characterization, on the other hand, gives you that personality, those character traits indirectly by explaining either speech of the character through the thoughts of the character, the way the character affects others, actions that the character takes place, or even sometimes the way a character looks. So you need to use inferencing to figure out more about this character. The example here, the boy who sat next to his sister as she poked him and teased him. He did not react. He carefully picked up her doll from the floor and placed it on her lap, saying gently, "Here you go. Why don't you play with your doll?" Again, we get that idea of patience without the author actually ever coming out and saying that to us. So when we analyze characters, we take a look at their physical appearance, what they look like. We look at their personality and their character traits, their background and history, their motivation. This is a big one. Why do they behave the way they do? Their relationships with others, conflicts and struggles, and how and if a character changes during the course of the book, and then ways that they think and feel, and then we can also get it from how do others feel about this character. A character motivation is the driving force behind why the character does what he or she does. So you think about, what does the main character want more than anything else? What is the goal? What do these secondary characters want more? What potential conflicts or struggles? And we're going to look at that more in just a minute. What I want you to do now is I want you to think of another character from Swiss Family Robinson. I want you to tell me who the character is. What does he or she want? What is their goal? What does he or she need? Sometimes a need's different than a want. What is their motivation? What does this person do to get what they need? And how, and maybe if, maybe even not, does the character change during the book? Go ahead, pause, and answer those questions in one sentence each. Next, we've got plot components. In plot, we've got 5 elements. The first is exposition. And exposition is the start of our story. This is how our story is going to begin. On this peak rising up here, our triangle, we have what's called rising action. And this is a series of events. This is getting into what's actually happening in the novel. And this is our conflicts. And these conflicts, it's building, building, building to get to the very summit of our pyramid. And this is what we call the climax. This is the turning point. This is the most intense point of the whole story, either mentally, emotionally, what's happening action-wise. This is the highest point of the story. And then that part, from then on, we've got coming down this downward slope, falling action. And this is how our story is starting to come together to end, what is happening to our characters, and ends finally at the bottom with our resolution. This is the conclusion. This is tying all the pieces together, explaining why things happened, what happened to the various characters at the end of the book. Now, there are some different techniques in plot. The first is suspense, excitement, or tension. We've seen that already in elements of Swiss Family Robinson. There's flashbacks, and this interrupts the normal sequence of events to tell you about something that happened in the past. You've got surprise endings. These are conclusions that the reader did not expect to happen. In other words, it's the book where the main character dies at the end. You did not see that coming. And finally, one of my favorites is foreshadowing. These are hints about what is going to happen next in your story. Now we hit conflict. Conflict is, in essence, the battle between two forces in a book. Now remember, we often think of conflict as bad, but in literature it's not always bad. Sometimes conflict is used to create change, and sometimes that change is positive change. So don't necessarily think of conflict as strictly negative. We're going to look at 6 types of conflict. The first is man versus man. In man versus man conflict, you have one character in direct conflict with another character in the book. In man versus nature, this is where man is in conflict with a force or a problem of nature. If we think to Swiss Family Robinson in the beginning of the book, the storm that left their ship stranded. Man versus society, number 3, this is a problem with the laws or beliefs of a group. This is a character versus community, society, or culture. And then we've got man versus self. This is a problem when a person is struggling internally. They're not quite sure what to do, what to think. It is completely an internal conflict. Then we have man versus supernatural or fate. This is a problem with an all-powerful, or sometimes it's a vengeful god or a supernatural entity. And finally, man versus technology. This is dealing with problems with technology standing in the way of your protagonist. Think about issues with robots, and artificial intelligence is often where we'll see this type of conflict. Now, finally, I want you guys to end with this. I want you to take these 6 types of conflict here, and I want you to come up for each of these with a well-known movie that you have seen or maybe heard of that each type of conflict is exemplified in that movie. So try not to use a movie more than once, because some of them can be used multiple times, but come up with different movies that depict man versus man, man versus nature, man versus society, and man versus self, man versus supernatural, or sometimes it's called fate, and man versus technology. We'll talk to you guys again in the morning.